Welcome to a chapter a day. Every person is born into a quiet tension they rarely recognize, the pull to stand alone, and the need to belong. At first, these forces appear to oppose each other, forcing people to choose sides. Freedom or connection, self-reliance or intimacy, independence or community. But over time, life reveals something far more complicated. Because the people who become completely independent often discover an unexpected emptiness beneath their strength. And the people who devote themselves entirely to others slowly begin losing the very thing they were trying to share, themselves. Most people spend their lives unconsciously swinging between these extremes, trying to protect themselves from disappointment, trying to avoid abandonment, trying to prove they do not need anyone, or trying so desperately to feel connected that they abandon their own center completely. And eventually, both paths begin to collapse. Because isolation may protect the mind for a while, but it quietly starves the soul. And overattachment may feel like love, but it slowly dissolves identity. Pause for a moment and think about your own life. How many times have you withdrawn from people because being misunderstood felt exhausting? How many times have you stayed connected to environments, relationships, or expectations that slowly pulled you away from yourself? How many decisions were truly yours? And how many were shaped by fear, comparison, loneliness, or the need for approval? Most people never stop long enough to ask these questions. They simply continue adapting, adjusting themselves to survive emotionally, becoming versions of themselves that feel acceptable instead of authentic. And the strange part is, many people call this manifestation. They try to force abundance while emotionally exhausted. They visualize success while secretly feeling disconnected from themselves. They chase alignment while constantly absorbing the emotional noise of the people around them. But manifestation was never meant to be a performance. And it was never meant to become another form of emotional survival. Because manifestation does not respond to isolation. And it does not respond to dependency. It responds to coherence. When your inner world and outer world stop competing. When your identity stops fragmenting. When your nervous system no longer swings between emotional protection and emotional self-abandonment. That is when life begins responding differently. Not because the universe suddenly changes, but because you do. You may not have noticed this before, but many people are unconsciously delaying their own manifestations by living in contradiction. They say they want freedom, while fearing separation. They say they want love, while fearing vulnerability. They say they want purpose, while constantly reshaping themselves to fit the expectations of others. And eventually the subconscious mind becomes unstable, not because it lacks desire, but because it no longer knows which identity is real. This audiobook is not about choosing between solitude and connection. It is about learning how to hold both without distortion, how to remain fully yourself while still participating deeply in life, how to protect your energy without emotionally disappearing, how to build relationships without sacrificing identity, how to create from clarity instead of emotional dependence, and how to become internally coherent enough that manifestation stops feeling forced. Because the truth is, the strongest people are not isolated, and the most loving people are not self-abandoned. Real power is stability within movement, the ability to remain whole while life continues changing around you. And over the next few hours, you are going to begin seeing yourself differently. You're going to recognize patterns most people never notice. You're going to understand why certain relationships changed your energy, why certain environments altered your thinking, why some periods of your life felt deeply aligned and others felt emotionally fragmented. And perhaps most importantly, you are going to understand why the balance between freedom and connection may be the hidden foundation beneath everything you are trying to create. So take a deep breath, slow down for a moment, and allow yourself to listen carefully. because what you are about to hear may challenge some of the deepest assumptions you have about identity, relationships, manifestation, and yourself. And the deeper truth behind all of this is something most people never discover until much later in life. Let us begin. Chapter 1. The Hidden War Between Freedom and Belonging. There is a silent conflict taking place inside almost every human being. Most people never fully recognize it. They simply feel its effects. A strange tension between wanting to be completely free and desperately wanting to feel connected. The desire to stand alone. The desire to belong. And depending on what life has taught a person, they usually begin leaning too far toward one side. Some people become deeply independent. They convince themselves they do not need anyone. They become self-reliant, emotionally guarded, productive, disciplined, and difficult to reach. Others move in the opposite direction. They become emotionally attached to relationships, environments, approval, and validation. They fear separation. They fear disappointing others. They fear becoming disconnected from the people around them. And while these two paths appear completely different on the surface, they are often driven by the exact same fear: the fear of losing safety. Pause for a moment and think about that. Two people can live entirely opposite lifestyles while secretly protecting the same emotional wound. One withdraws from people. The other clings to them. One avoids dependence. The other avoids abandonment. But both are searching for stability. This hidden war between freedom and belonging shapes more human behavior than most people realize. It influences relationships, career decisions, self-worth, manifestation, identity, even spirituality. And modern life quietly intensifies this conflict every single day. Because we are now living in a world where people are more connected than ever before. Yet many feel emotionally disconnected from themselves. Thousands of interactions, endless notifications, constant communication, and still, loneliness continues growing. That should tell you something important. Connection alone does not cure loneliness, because loneliness is not merely the absence of people. Sometimes loneliness is the absence of coherence, the absence of feeling fully seen, fully grounded, fully connected to your own identity. There are people surrounded by attention who still feel emotionally invisible. And there are people completely alone who feel deeply connected to themselves. This is why the problem runs deeper than social interaction. The real issue is alignment. You may not have noticed this before, but human beings are biologically designed for both individuality and connection at the same time. Your nervous system wants safety through belonging, but your spirit also seeks freedom through self-expression. And when either side becomes distorted, suffering begins. Too much isolation creates emotional starvation. Too much attachment creates identity erosion. And most people spend years unconsciously swinging between both extremes. Think about modern culture for a moment. People are constantly told contradictory messages. Be independent. Never rely on anyone. Protect your energy. Cut people off. At the same time, stay available. Be liked. Fit in. Stay connected. Keep everyone happy. And eventually the nervous system becomes confused. Because one part of the person craves closeness, while another part fears losing itself inside that closeness. This creates emotional instability that many people mistake for personality. Some people call themselves independent when they are actually emotionally guarded. Some call themselves loving when they are actually afraid of being alone. And unless this becomes conscious, people continue building identities around survival patterns instead of truth. Have you ever noticed that some of your strongest moments felt lonely, and some of your closest relationships made you feel smaller? Think about that carefully. There are moments when achievement feels strangely empty because there is nobody meaningful to share it with. And there are relationships that appear loving on the surface, yet quietly drain clarity, confidence, and identity over time. This is the paradox most people never fully understand. Freedom without connection becomes emptiness. Connection without freedom becomes collapse. And somewhere between those extremes, there is another way of living entirely. But before understanding balance, you must first understand the hidden mechanisms underneath these extremes. Because independence is not always strength, and connection is not always love. Sometimes independence becomes emotional armor, a way of protecting yourself from disappointment, vulnerability, rejection, or dependence. Some people learned very early in life that relying on others created pain, so they adapted. They became hyper-independent, self-sufficient, emotionally contained, highly capable. But beneath that capability, there is often exhaustion, because carrying everything alone may feel powerful for a while, until the nervous system begins starving for genuine connection. The human mind can survive isolation, but the soul slowly begins hardening inside it. And the dangerous part is this: isolation often feels productive in the beginning. There are fewer distractions, less emotional complexity, more control, more predictability, no vulnerability, no disappointment, no emotional risk, which is why many people mistake emotional distance for peace. But peace and emotional numbness are not the same thing. A protected heart may avoid pain, but it also limits expansion, because growth often requires relational friction, reflection, challenge, witnessing, support. Human beings do not evolve entirely alone, and yet the opposite extreme creates another kind of suffering altogether. Some people lose themselves through overconnection. Their mood depends on everyone around them. Their identity shifts depending on who they are near. They fear disapproval. They overexplain themselves, overextend themselves, emotionally merge with the expectations of others, and slowly, they begin outsourcing identity. This happens more often than people realize. Many individuals no longer know what they genuinely think, feel, or desire beneath external influence. They absorb emotional atmospheres constantly: family expectations, relationship dynamics, social media comparison, cultural pressure, group identities, and over time, their inner voice becomes difficult to hear beneath all the noise. Pause for a moment and ask yourself something honestly. Who are you when nobody is emotionally pulling on you? Not when people need things from you. Not when expectations surround you. Not when approval is involved. Who are you in silence? Many people do not know, because they have spent years adapting themselves to maintain connection. An adaptation, when unconscious, slowly becomes self-loss. This is why some relationships feel emotionally exhausting even without obvious conflict. Not because the other person is evil, but because your nervous system stops feeling like itself around them. You shrink. You edit yourself. You become less natural, less grounded, less clear. And eventually, you begin disconnecting from your own center without realizing it. This is why the quality of connection matters more than the quantity. Not every relationship creates expansion. Some create fragmentation. Some reinforce fear. Some reinforce insecurity. Some reinforce dependency. And some quietly train the nervous system to abandon authenticity in exchange for belonging. You may not have noticed this before, but many people are terrified of loneliness not because they need connection, but because silence forces them to confront themselves. And at the same time, many people fear intimacy not because they dislike people, but because closeness threatens the emotional defenses they built for survival. This is why the nervous system often fears both abandonment and engulfment simultaneously. One fear says, "What if nobody stays?" The other says, "What if I disappear inside connection?" And unless a person learns how to hold both freedom and connection consciously, life becomes a cycle of emotional extremes. Pulling away, reattaching, isolating, overgiving, protecting, collapsing, repeating. But awareness changes everything. Because once you begin seeing the pattern, you stop unconsciously becoming the pattern. And this is where true transformation begins. Not by choosing one extreme over the other, but by learning the purpose each one was originally meant to serve. Solitude was never meant to become permanent emotional isolation. Its true purpose is restoration, clarity, reconnection with self. Solitude should strengthen identity, not replace connection entirely. And connection was never meant to erase individuality. Its purpose is expansion, support, shared growth, witnessing. Healthy connection should deepen identity, not dissolve it. This changes everything, because now relationships are no longer about emotional survival, and independence is no longer about emotional avoidance. Both become tools for alignment instead of protection. This is the sacred balance most people spend their lives searching for without realizing it. The ability to remain connected without losing yourself, and the ability to remain independent without emotionally disconnecting from life. Now here is the psychological twist most people never expect. The opposite of loneliness is not connection. It is coherence. Because a person can be surrounded by people and still feel fragmented within themselves. And another person can sit alone in complete peace because they are internally aligned. Coherence is when your inner world stops fighting itself. When your relationships, identity, emotions, values, and actions begin moving in the same direction. That is why coherence creates peace more deeply than attention ever can. And this is also why manifestation becomes distorted when identity is unstable. Because your future is not shaped only by your conscious desires. It is shaped by the environments you repeatedly enter, the relationships you normalize, the emotional states you rehearse, the identities you reinforce. Every environment teaches your nervous system what reality feels familiar. Every relationship subtly influences your energy. Every repeated emotional pattern becomes part of your subconscious identity. And eventually, your life begins organizing itself around what feels emotionally normal rather than what you consciously want. This is why awareness of your relational environment matters so deeply. Because manifestation is not happening in isolation. You are constantly being influenced by the emotional ecosystem surrounding you. And once you understand this, you begin becoming more intentional about where your energy lives, more intentional about who shapes your thinking, more intentional about the difference between genuine connection and unconscious dependency. You begin protecting your identity without emotionally closing yourself off from life. And that changes the entire direction of your future. Because real manifestation does not emerge from emotional extremes. It emerges from internal stability, from coherence, from becoming someone who no longer needs isolation to feel safe or self-abandonment to feel loved. And perhaps this explains something many people have secretly felt for years. Why certain successes still felt empty. Why certain relationships slowly drained vitality. Why some environments expanded clarity while others created confusion. You were never simply reacting to circumstances. You were responding to energetic environments, shaping your identity in real time. And once you begin seeing that clearly, you can no longer live unconsciously the same way again. Because now the question becomes deeper. If your relationships shape your energy, and your energy shapes your reality, then what happens when your identity itself becomes unstable? What happens when you unconsciously become different versions of yourself, depending on who surrounds you? And what if this hidden instability is one of the greatest reasons people feel disconnected from manifestation itself? That is where we are going next. Because the deeper problem is not merely loneliness. It is contradiction. You have begun recognizing the hidden war between freedom and belonging. Now it is time to understand how internal contradiction quietly delays the reality most people are trying to create. Chapter 2. Why manifestation feels delayed. What if manifestation is not delayed at all? Pause for a moment and truly sit with that question. Because most people spend years believing that manifestation works like a waiting room. You ask, you visualize, you affirm, and then you wait for reality to respond. But what if the deeper issue is not timing? What if the issue is contradiction? What if many people are not experiencing delayed manifestation, but unstable manifestation? This changes the entire conversation. Because once you begin understanding manifestation through the lens of identity and nervous system coherence, a completely different picture starts to emerge. Most people believe manifestation is primarily about desire. But desire alone is not enough. A person can consciously desire one reality while subconsciously rehearsing another every single day. And when this happens, the nervous system receives conflicting instructions. One part of the mind says, I want abundance. Another part quietly says, but abundance feels unsafe. One part says, I want love. Another part says, but vulnerability feels dangerous. One part says, I want freedom. Another part says, but freedom may lead to rejection, isolation, or separation. And eventually the subconscious mind becomes divided against itself. Not because the person lacks intelligence, not because they lack ambition, but because their identity is broadcasting opposing emotional realities at the same time. You may not have noticed this before, but human beings are constantly manifesting from emotional familiarity more than conscious intention. The nervous system prioritizes what feels known, what feels emotionally survivable, what feels psychologically predictable, even if it no longer serves growth. This is why some people repeatedly recreate cycles they consciously say they want to escape, not because they enjoy suffering, but because suffering has become emotionally familiar, and familiarity often feels safer than transformation. This is one of the hidden reasons manifestation can appear inconsistent, because many people attempt to create new realities while remaining emotionally attached to old identities. An identity always shapes perception. Perception shapes behavior. Behavior shapes emotional reinforcement. And emotional reinforcement eventually shapes reality. This is why manifestation is not simply about attracting external things. It is about stabilizing internal states. Think about how many people say they want peace, yet remain emotionally addicted to chaos. They say they want calm relationships, yet subconsciously distrust calm because drama feels more emotionally familiar. They say they want freedom, yet continuously seek approval before making decisions. This is not failure. It is fragmentation. And fragmentation creates energetic inconsistency. One moment the person feels powerful. The next moment they collapse into fear, doubt, comparison, or emotional dependence. One day they believe in themselves. The next day they completely reshape their identity based on external validation. And because the nervous system cannot stabilize conflicting realities simultaneously, manifestation begins feeling unstable too. Pause for a moment and think about your own life honestly. How many versions of yourself have you become just to adapt to different environments? One version around family, another version around friends, another version online, another version inside romantic relationships, another version when alone, and eventually a strange exhaustion begins appearing. Because fragmentation consumes energy. The mind becomes tired from constant emotional adaptation. The nervous system becomes overstimulated from identity inconsistency. And the person slowly loses connection with what genuinely feels true. This is why clarity becomes difficult. Not because the person lacks intelligence, but because too many conflicting identities are operating at once. Now here is where the conversation becomes deeper. Many people unknowingly confuse external desire with authentic desire. They chase things they were conditioned to admire: status, attention, validation, approval, success that impresses others, relationships that appear desirable externally, lifestyles built around comparison instead of alignment. And because the desire itself is not fully authentic, manifestation begins carrying emotional distortion from the beginning. Pause for a moment. How many desires are actually yours, and how many came from comparison? Think about that carefully. How much of what you want was genuinely born from your spirit, and how much was shaped by social conditioning, insecurity, loneliness, fear of inadequacy, or the need to feel worthy? Many people never ask this question. They simply continue chasing identities that were handed to them by culture. And eventually they wonder why fulfillment still feels distant after achievement arrives. Because manifestation without authenticity creates temporary stimulation, not lasting alignment. This is why approval addiction quietly damages manifestation. When a person becomes emotionally dependent on external validation, their identity stops remaining stable internally. Their emotional state rises and falls based on how others perceive them. Praise creates confidence. Criticism creates collapse. Attention creates temporary certainty. Silence creates anxiety. And slowly, the person begins outsourcing self-worth to external reaction. This creates enormous energetic instability, because the subconscious mind no longer operates from grounded identity. It operates from emotional dependency. You may not have noticed this before, but many people do not actually fear failure. They fear invisibility. They fear insignificance. They fear disconnection from social belonging, which is why social comparison has become one of the strongest distortions of modern manifestation. People no longer simply want things. They want reassurance that they matter. And social media intensifies this constantly. Every scroll subtly teaches the nervous system what success is supposed to look like, what beauty is supposed to look like, what happiness is supposed to look like, what achievement is supposed to look like. And eventually people begin unconsciously manifesting from emotional inadequacy instead of inner clarity. They do not create because they feel inspired. They create because they feel behind. And creation driven by emotional lack produces exhaustion much faster than creation driven by alignment. This is why so many people secretly feel tired while pursuing goals they once believed would fulfill them. Their nervous system is running on comparison instead of coherence. And comparison fragments identity, because comparison constantly pulls attention away from the self, away from intuition, away from genuine alignment, away from emotional truth. Now think about the deeper consequence of this. If your identity constantly shifts depending on who you compare yourself to, then your manifestation becomes unstable too, because reality reflects internal consistency more deeply than temporary emotional intensity. A person cannot sustainably manifest from contradiction forever. Eventually, the nervous system defaults back to emotional familiarity, back to old beliefs, back to conditioned identity, back to relational patterns, back to environments that reinforce the old self. And this is why some manifestations seem to disappear after arriving, not because the universe removed them, but because the identity supporting them was never fully stabilized. A person may attract success while still subconsciously identifying with unworthiness. They may attract love while still fearing intimacy. They may attract abundance while still emotionally attached to scarcity. And eventually, internal contradiction creates collapse. This is why emotional consistency matters so deeply. Not forced positivity, not constant affirmation, not pretending to feel good. True consistency means your inner world stops constantly contradicting itself. It means your nervous system no longer swings violently between confidence and fear, expansion and self-sabotage, connection and emotional withdrawal. because manifestation responds more deeply to stabilized identity than emotional performance. Now here is the psychological twist most people never expect. The universe may not be withholding your manifestation. Your identity may simply be unstable. That realization changes everything. Because now manifestation is no longer about begging reality to change. It becomes about becoming coherent enough to sustain the reality you desire. And coherence requires honesty. Honesty about your emotional patterns. Honesty about your fears. Honesty about your relationships. Honesty about the identities you unconsciously perform to maintain belonging. This is why awareness becomes the beginning of transformation. Because once contradiction becomes conscious, it can begin dissolving. You stop trying to force outcomes through desperation. You stop chasing external validation as proof of worth. You stop constantly reshaping yourself to fit every environment you enter. And slowly, your energy stabilizes. Your decisions become clearer. Your relationships become more intentional. Your desires become more authentic. And manifestation begins feeling less like struggle and more like alignment. But there is another layer to this most people never fully recognize. Because internal instability is not created in isolation. It is reinforced socially. The people around you influence your emotional identity more than you realize. Their fears affect your nervous system. Their expectations affect your perception. Their emotional habits shape what feels normal. And sometimes, without realizing it, entire environments reinforce contradiction. A person may be trying to grow while remaining surrounded by emotional patterns that continuously pull them back toward the old identity. This is why some people feel deeply aligned alone, but fragmented around certain environments. Because the nervous system adapts socially. Human beings unconsciously mirror emotional states constantly. And once you understand that, you begin paying closer attention to the energetic ecosystems surrounding your life. You begin realizing that manifestation is not only personal, it is relational, environmental, psychological, energetic. And this explains why some people feel stuck even while genuinely trying to evolve. Because part of their identity is still being rehearsed through the people and environments they repeatedly enter. And the people around you may be reinforcing that instability without realizing it. This is where the next stage of the journey begins. Because once you recognize how contradiction delays alignment, you must begin understanding one of the deepest forms of contradiction of all, the contradiction of isolation itself. Why some people unconsciously withdraw from connection the moment life begins improving. Why emotional self-protection can secretly become a prison. Why hyperindependence often hides unresolved fear beneath the appearance of strength. You have begun seeing how instability distorts manifestation. Now it is time to understand the emotional armor many people mistake for power. Chapter 3. The Isolation Trap. There is a form of pain that does not look painful from the outside. In fact, many people mistake it for strength, discipline, focus, independence, control. But beneath the surface, it is often something else entirely. Emotional self-protection. The isolation trap rarely begins as isolation. It usually begins as disappointment, a betrayal, a rejection, an emotional wound, a moment where trust became associated with pain. And slowly, almost invisibly, the nervous system begins adapting. It starts creating distance, not all at once, just enough to feel safer, just enough to avoid vulnerability, just enough to reduce emotional risk. And over time, distance becomes identity. The person begins telling themselves, "I don't need anyone. I work better alone. People only complicate things. Attachment is weakness. I'm more peaceful by myself." And at first it feels true, because isolation initially creates something the nervous system craves after emotional pain. Control. No unpredictability. No emotional disappointment. No vulnerability. No need to explain yourself. No risk of abandonment. No pressure to trust. And for a while, this can feel incredibly powerful, especially after chaos, especially after heartbreak, especially after years of emotional inconsistency. Isolation can feel like relief. Silence can feel safer than intimacy. Distance can feel cleaner than connection. And this is why hyperindependence often becomes emotionally addictive. Because emotional distance reduces friction temporarily. But temporary relief is not always healing. Sometimes it is simply avoidance that feels calmer than confrontation. Pause for a moment and think about your own life honestly. How many times have you withdrawn not because you truly wanted solitude, but because connection started feeling emotionally exhausting? How many times did you convince yourself you no longer cared, when in reality you were simply tired of disappointment? How many goals became substitutes for intimacy? How many achievements became distractions from vulnerability? Many people do not realize how deeply emotional pain can reshape identity. A person who once desired closeness can slowly become emotionally unavailable without consciously noticing the shift. Not because they lack love, but because survival became more familiar than openness. This is where productivity addiction often enters the picture. Some people do not heal emotionally. They simply become busy enough to avoid feeling. Work becomes emotional anesthesia. Achievement becomes emotional control. Constant motion becomes a way of avoiding stillness. And society often rewards this behavior. The overworker is praised. The emotionally detached person is called disciplined. The hyper-independent individual is admired. But admiration does not always equal wholeness. A person can appear successful externally while remaining emotionally disconnected internally. And this creates one of the most dangerous illusions of modern life. The illusion that emotional suppression is maturity. You may not have noticed this before, but many people are not calm. They are emotionally shut down. There is a difference. True peace remains emotionally open. Shutdown removes emotional access completely. One is grounded, the other is defended. And unless a person becomes honest about this distinction, isolation slowly becomes a prison disguised as freedom. Think about how often modern culture romanticizes emotional detachment. Protect your peace. Cut everyone off. Move in silence. Trust nobody. Depend on nobody. Some of these ideas contain wisdom in moderation, but taken to extremes, they create emotional starvation. Because the nervous system is not designed only for protection. It is also designed for connection, witnessing, belonging, shared emotional regulation, support. Human beings are relational creatures. Even the most introverted individuals still require meaningful connection to remain psychologically healthy. And yet many people continue confusing emotional numbness with self-mastery. They become so accustomed to surviving alone that receiving support begins feeling uncomfortable. Compliments feel suspicious. Care feels overwhelming. Closeness feels intrusive. Vulnerability feels dangerous. And slowly, the person begins rejecting the very things they secretly need most. Not consciously, subconsciously, because the nervous system associates openness with risk. This is why some people sabotage intimacy the moment life begins improving. They want connection intellectually, but emotionally they still associate closeness with pain, disappointment, instability, or loss of control. So the moment relationships deepen, fear activates. Distance returns. Walls rise again. Not because the person is cruel, but because their nervous system still believes isolation equals safety. This is one of the hidden tragedies of unresolved emotional pain. It quietly transforms protection into identity, and eventually the person no longer knows the difference between who they are and who they became to survive. Pause for a moment and reflect honestly. Have you confused peace with emotional distance? That question changes everything, because many people believe they are protecting their energy, when they are actually protecting unresolved fear. Real peace does not require emotional disconnection from life. Real peace allows presence, openness, flexibility, the ability to connect without collapsing. But emotional armor creates rigidity, and rigid identities eventually become emotionally exhausting to maintain. This is why hyperindependence often hides deep fatigue beneath the surface. Carrying life entirely alone consumes enormous emotional energy. Always being the strong one, always solving everything internally, always remaining composed, always avoiding vulnerability. Eventually, the nervous system becomes tired. Not weak, tired. Tired of performing in vulnerability. Tired of suppressing emotional needs. Tired of pretending isolation no longer hurts. And here is the deeper paradox. The more emotionally isolated a person becomes, the harder genuine connection starts feeling. Not because they are incapable of love, but because vulnerability becomes unfamiliar. And unfamiliarity creates discomfort. This is why many hyper-independent individuals unconsciously choose emotionally unavailable relationships. It feels safer. Distance feels familiar. Inconsistency feels emotionally manageable. But deeply available connection feels threatening because it requires openness, presence, emotional honesty, trust. And trust becomes difficult when survival taught the nervous system that emotional closeness eventually leads to pain. This creates a cycle many people live inside for years without realizing it. They crave intimacy, but fear vulnerability. They desire connection, but avoid emotional exposure. They want love, but resist dependence. So they remain trapped between desire and defense, close enough to feel longing, too guarded to feel fully connected. And eventually loneliness becomes normalized. Not dramatic loneliness, functional loneliness. The kind hidden behind productivity, routines, goals, and self-sufficiency. The kind that appears successful externally while quietly feeling emotionally disconnected internally. You may not have noticed this before, but some people use constant self-improvement as emotional avoidance. They endlessly optimize themselves. More discipline, more work, more goals, more control, more achievement, because improvement feels safer than intimacy. Growth feels safer than vulnerability. And while ambition itself is not the problem, ambition without emotional openness eventually becomes hollow. Because achievement cannot fully replace human connection. A person may build success while slowly losing emotional softness. They may accumulate accomplishments while becoming increasingly difficult to reach emotionally. And eventually life begins feeling strangely empty despite external progress. This is why isolation eventually starves meaning. Because meaning is not created through achievement alone. Meaning emerges through relationship, contribution, shared experience, witnessing, emotional resonance. Connection gives depth to existence. Not shallow connection. Not constant social stimulation. Real connection. The kind where identity does not need performance to feel accepted. The kind where silence feels safe. The kind where authenticity does not threaten belonging. And this is why complete isolation eventually distorts manifestation too. Because manifestation is not only about creating externally. It is also about emotional expansion internally. A closed nervous system can survive, but it struggles to fully receive. Receive support, receive intimacy, receive abundance, receive uncertainty, receive life itself. Now here is the psychological twist most people never expect. Some people are not independent. They are simply emotionally unreachable. That realization can feel uncomfortable, because society often glorifies emotional unavailability as strength. But true strength is not emotional absence. True strength is emotional stability without avoidance, the ability to remain open without losing yourself, the ability to trust without becoming dependent, the ability to connect without abandoning discernment. That is strength, not emotional isolation. And this changes the entire purpose of healing. Healing is not becoming emotionally untouchable. It is becoming emotionally safe within yourself. Safe enough to remain open. Safe enough to experience connection without constant fear. Safe enough to stop building identity entirely around protection. Because protection alone cannot create fulfillment. Protection can prevent pain, but it cannot fully create meaning. It cannot fully create intimacy. It cannot fully create expansion. And perhaps this is the deeper realization many people spend years avoiding. A protected heart can survive, but it cannot fully create. And this is where the next layer of the journey begins. Because if isolation creates emotional distance, then overconnection creates another kind of danger entirely. The loss of self. The dissolving of identity through emotional merging. The slow erosion of clarity through constant external influence. You have begun understanding how protection can become imprisonment. Now it is time to explore the opposite extreme. Chapter 4. When connection becomes self-loss. Human beings are designed for connection, for belonging, for emotional resonance, for shared experience. There is something deeply healing about being understood by another person, being seen without performance, being accepted without pretending. Healthy connection regulates the nervous system. It reduces emotional isolation. It reminds people they are not alone in the human experience. But like anything powerful, connection becomes dangerous when balance disappears. Because connection can nourish identity, or slowly consume it. And many people never realize the difference until they wake up one day feeling emotionally exhausted, mentally unclear, and strangely disconnected from themselves. Not because they lacked relationships, but because they lost themselves inside them. This is the opposite extreme of isolation, where the fear is no longer abandonment. The fear becomes disconnection from others. So the person begins organizing their entire emotional life around maintaining attachment, keeping people comfortable, keeping relationships stable, avoiding disapproval, avoiding conflict, avoiding rejection, and slowly, identity begins adapting around emotional survival again. But this time, instead of withdrawing from people, the person overmerges with them. This often begins subtly. Constant texting, constant checking, constant emotional availability, the need for reassurance, the fear of delayed responses, the urge to explain yourself repeatedly, the inability to fully relax without external confirmation. And because these behaviors are normalized in modern culture, many people never recognize how deeply emotionally dependent they have become. Pause for a moment and think honestly. How often do people sit alone now without immediately reaching for stimulation or connection? A phone, a message, a notification, a response, an update, a reaction. Modern life has created unprecedented emotional accessibility. People are now connected to each other almost constantly, and yet many feel increasingly disconnected from themselves, because uninterrupted external input leaves very little space for inner clarity. This is one of the hidden consequences of overconnection. The nervous system never fully settles into its own rhythm. Attention is constantly being pulled outward, toward reactions, toward expectations, toward emotional monitoring, toward social awareness. And over time, a person can begin losing contact with their own emotional center beneath the noise of everyone else's energy. You may not have noticed this before, but attention is identity forming. Whatever repeatedly captures your emotional attention slowly shapes your internal reality. This is why environments matter, relationships matter, conversations matter. What you emotionally rehearse becomes psychologically familiar. and familiarity eventually becomes identity. Think about how often people alter themselves unconsciously around others. Different language, different behavior, different emotional expression, different opinions, different energy. Some adaptation is natural, but chronic adaptation creates fragmentation, especially when the adaptation is driven by fear of losing connection. This is where people-pleasing begins eroding identity, not because kindness is wrong, but because self-abandonment disguised as kindness eventually creates resentment, exhaustion, and confusion. Many people do not know how to disappoint others without feeling guilty, so they overextend themselves emotionally. They become overly available, overly accommodating, overly responsible for the emotional states of everyone around them. And eventually they begin living reactively instead of intentionally. Their emotional state depends on external harmony. If others are upset, they feel unsafe. If others withdraw, they feel anxious. If others disapprove, they feel unstable. This creates validation dependence, and validation dependence quietly destroys internal authority, because the person no longer trusts themselves fully. They trust emotional feedback more than inner clarity. Praise feels like certainty. Disapproval feels like danger. And over time, identity becomes externally managed. This is why some people lose clarity after entering relationships, social groups, workplaces, or emotionally intense environments. Not because connection itself is unhealthy, but because they unconsciously surrender too much psychological space. Their attention becomes consumed by external emotional dynamics. Who feels okay? Who feels distant? Who approves? Who disapproves? Who responded? Who did not respond? And eventually the nervous system becomes overstimulated from emotional monitoring. This is why overconnection often creates mental exhaustion. Not because people are weak, but because the nervous system was never designed for constant emotional accessibility. Human beings need emotional space to maintain clarity, silence, reflection, internal grounding. Without that space, identity begins dissolving into environmental influence. Think about how many people no longer know what they genuinely feel until they are finally alone. Away from noise, away from expectations, away from constant emotional input. Only then does their real emotional state begin surfacing. But many people avoid that silence, because silence reveals truths distraction keeps hidden. This is why some individuals remain constantly socially engaged, not because connection fulfills them, but because stillness forces them to confront themselves. And yet overconnection creates another paradox most people never expect. The more emotionally fused a person becomes with others, the harder authentic intimacy actually becomes. Because emotional fusion is not the same as connection. Fusion removes boundaries. Connection preserves individuality. Fusion says, "My emotional stability depends on you." Connection says, "I can remain myself while loving you." That distinction changes everything. Because healthy relationships require two whole nervous systems interacting consciously, not two emotionally entangled identities losing themselves inside each other. This is why emotionally fused relationships often become exhausting over time. There is too much emotional access, too much dependency, too little psychological space, and eventually individuality begins collapsing beneath emotional entanglement. You may not have noticed this before, but some relationships do not destroy people through conflict. They dissolve people through constant emotional access. That is the psychological plot twist many people overlook. Not all damaging relationships are dramatic. Some are quiet, subtle, gradual, a slow erosion of selfhood through constant emotional merging. The person slowly stops asking, "What do I genuinely want?" and begins asking, "What keeps connection stable?" They stop making decisions from alignment and start making decisions from attachment preservation. and eventually their nervous system forgets what internal clarity even feels like. Pause for a moment and think about this carefully. Who are you when nobody is emotionally pulling on you? Not when someone needs reassurance. Not when someone expects a response. Not when someone is upset with you. Not when you are trying to maintain harmony. Who are you in emotional stillness? That question reveals more than most people realize. Because many individuals have spent years emotionally adapting themselves to maintain belonging. An adaptation repeated long enough eventually feels like personality. This is why some people become deeply anxious when setting boundaries. Boundaries threaten emotional attachment. They fear disappointing others, being misunderstood, appearing selfish, losing connection. But boundaries are not rejection. Boundaries preserve energetic integrity. They protect the nervous system from emotional overconsumption. Without boundaries, identity becomes porous. Everything enters. Everyone influences. Every emotion becomes absorbed. And eventually emotional exhaustion becomes inevitable. Healthy boundaries are not emotional walls. They are forms of psychological clarity. They allow a person to remain compassionate without becoming consumed, present without becoming fused, available without abandoning themselves. This is where many people misunderstand spirituality, love, and connection entirely. They believe openness means unlimited access. But unrestricted emotional access often creates instability, not intimacy. Presence is different from emotional fusion. Presence means you can remain emotionally available while still remaining grounded within yourself. Fusion means your identity collapses into the emotional atmosphere around you. One creates connection. The other creates dependence. And dependence eventually breeds fear. Fear of loss. Fear of separation. Fear of disapproval. Fear of emotional instability. Which is why emotionally dependent relationships often become emotionally controlling without either person fully realizing it. One person begins regulating themselves through the other, and eventually both identities become distorted. This is why emotional sovereignty matters so deeply. Not emotional isolation, not emotional coldness. Sovereignty, the ability to remain connected without surrendering your center. The ability to love without abandoning discernment. The ability to care deeply while still maintaining internal stability. That is healthy connection. And ironically, this kind of grounded individuality actually creates deeper intimacy than emotional fusion ever can. Because real intimacy requires authenticity, not performance, not emotional dependency, not self-erasure. Authenticity, the courage to remain fully yourself while staying emotionally present with another person. And that requires nervous system stability. Because unstable identity constantly seeks external reassurance. Stable identity creates connection from fullness instead of fear. This is why manifestation becomes distorted through overconnection too. Because when identity becomes externally managed, desire becomes unclear. The person no longer knows whether they are creating from alignment or from the need to maintain approval, attachment, or belonging. And eventually their reality begins reflecting emotional confusion, not because they lack potential, but because their attention has become fragmented across too many external influences. This is why clarity requires space, silence, boundaries, moments where the nervous system can reconnect with itself without constant emotional interference. Not isolation, intentional space. There is a difference. Isolation disconnects from life. Intentional solitude reconnects you to yourself. And this is one of the deepest forms of balance a person can learn. How to remain deeply connected without emotionally disappearing. How to love without losing identity. How to care without absorbing everything. How to remain open without becoming emotionally consumed. Because connection should expand identity, not erase it. And perhaps this explains something many people secretly feel, but rarely say aloud. Why some relationships become emotionally exhausting even when love exists. Why some environments create mental fog. Why constant accessibility creates emotional fatigue. Why too much exposure to external energy slowly weakens clarity. You were never meant to emotionally carry every environment you enter. You were never meant to lose yourself to remain loved. And the moment you begin understanding that, relationships start changing. Your energy starts changing. Your decisions start changing. Because now you understand that protecting your identity is not selfish. It is necessary for coherence. You have now seen both extremes. Isolation and overconnection. One protects identity by withdrawing from life. The other sacrifices identity to remain emotionally attached to life. But neither creates true balance. And now the deeper question emerges. If relationships shape energy, and energy shapes identity, then what exactly are relationships doing to your nervous system beneath conscious awareness? How much of your emotional reality is actually being influenced by the people and environments around you? That is where we are going next. You have begun understanding how connection can become self-loss. Now it is time to understand the invisible energetic architecture beneath human relationships themselves. Chapter 5. The energetic architecture of relationships. Every relationship changes you. Not always dramatically, not always visibly, but subtly, constantly, psychologically, emotionally, energetically. Human beings are far more absorbent than they realize. Thought patterns spread. Emotional states spread. Beliefs spread. Stress spreads. Ambition spreads. Fear spreads. Calm spreads. And most people move through life unconsciously adapting to the emotional environments surrounding them every day. You absorb more from your environment than your conscious mind realizes. Pause for a moment and think about how true that already feels. Have you ever noticed how different you feel around different people? Around one person you feel grounded, clear, relaxed, more like yourself. Around another person, your nervous system tightens. Your thoughts become scattered. Your energy drops. Your confidence changes. Your behavior changes. Your emotional rhythm changes. And often this happens before a single word is even spoken. Most people underestimate how deeply relationships shape internal reality, because the influence is often invisible. It happens gradually, quietly, repeatedly, and over time, repetition becomes identity. This is one of the hidden architectures beneath human experience. Relationships are not only emotional experiences, they are conditioning environments. Every person you repeatedly engage with teaches your nervous system something about reality. What feels safe? What feels dangerous? What feels normal? What feels possible? What feels acceptable? What feels familiar? And eventually your subconscious begins organizing itself around those emotional patterns. This is why environments matter far more than most people realize. Not because people are weak, but because human beings are neurologically relational. The nervous system is designed to mirror, to synchronize, to adapt socially. This is part of survival. Long before modern civilization, belonging to the group increased survival probability. So the brain evolved to monitor emotional environments constantly. Tone of voice, facial expressions, body language, emotional consistency, stress levels, social acceptance. The nervous system is always scanning, always adjusting, always asking, "Am I safe here?" And because this process is largely subconscious, many people never realize how deeply they are being influenced by repeated emotional exposure. You may not have noticed this before, but your nervous system often changes before your conscious mind does. This is why some environments feel draining even when nothing bad happens externally. Your body feels it before your thoughts fully understand it. A room filled with tension affects breathing patterns. Chronic criticism affects self-perception. Emotional inconsistency affects nervous system regulation. Constant negativity affects possibility perception. And repeated exposure eventually conditions emotional expectation. This is emotional contagion. Human beings unconsciously absorb emotional states from each other constantly. One anxious person can influence an entire environment. One calm person can stabilize a room. One fearful mindset repeated long enough can reshape the beliefs of everyone nearby. And this happens far more deeply in close relationships because repetition increases conditioning power. The more emotionally accessible someone becomes to you, the more influence they naturally gain over your nervous system. This is why emotionally chaotic environments eventually create internal instability. Even highly self-aware individuals are still affected by repeated emotional exposure, because awareness alone does not fully override nervous system conditioning. Repetition matters. Environment matters. Relational energy matters. Think about how different versions of yourself emerge around different people. With some individuals, you feel expansive, creative, motivated, emotionally safe. Your mind opens. Your nervous system relaxes. Your identity strengthens. Around others, you become smaller, more anxious, more guarded, more self-conscious, less expressive, less clear. And over time, these relational experiences shape subconscious expectation. This is identity synchronization, the unconscious tendency for people to adapt emotionally, mentally, and behaviorally to the environments they repeatedly occupy. This explains why certain friendships alter ambition, why certain relationships weaken confidence, why certain families reinforce limitation, why certain communities normalize dysfunction, why certain partnerships accelerate growth, why certain social circles suppress authenticity. Human beings unconsciously synchronize to emotional ecosystems. Not perfectly, but consistently. Pause for a moment and reflect honestly. Who do you become repeatedly around the people closest to you? Not who you hope to be. Not who you pretend to be. Who do you consistently become? More grounded or more reactive? More authentic or more performative? More peaceful or more emotionally unstable? That question reveals enormous truth about the energetic architecture surrounding your life. Because manifestation is deeply influenced by emotional familiarity. And emotional familiarity is heavily shaped by relational environments. This is why some people struggle to sustain transformation after moments of inspiration. They leave an empowering environment, only to return to emotional ecosystems that reinforce the old identity again. And eventually the nervous system defaults back toward what feels socially familiar. Not necessarily what is healthiest. Not necessarily what is most aligned. What is familiar. This is one of the hidden reasons personal growth can feel difficult. Growth often requires environmental shifts alongside internal shifts. Because if the environment constantly reinforces the previous identity, the nervous system experiences tension. One part of the self is trying to evolve. Another part is being conditioned backward through repeated exposure. This creates energetic conflict, and many people interpret that conflict as failure. But often it is simply conditioning resistance. You may not have noticed this before, but some people do not drain your energy because they are bad. They drain it because your nervous system changes around them. That realization matters deeply, because it removes unnecessary judgment. Not all draining relationships are abusive. Not all difficult environments are malicious. Sometimes there is simply energetic incompatibility, different emotional rhythms, different nervous system patterns, different levels of emotional regulation, different psychological conditioning, and prolonged exposure creates exhaustion because the nervous system remains in adaptation mode constantly. This is why some conversations leave you feeling heavy without knowing why. Why some environments create mental fog. Why certain people increase self-doubt. Why some relationships quietly weaken intuition. The nervous system is adapting beneath conscious awareness, and adaptation consumes energy. This is also why emotionally regulated individuals often feel calming to be around. Their nervous system creates safety signals: consistency, presence, groundedness. The body responds to that. The mind responds to that. The subconscious responds to that. Human beings are constantly co-regulating each other emotionally, which means relationships are not merely social experiences. They are energetic training grounds. Every repeated interaction reinforces something psychologically: scarcity or abundance, fear or safety, chaos or stability, authenticity or performance, expansion or contraction. And eventually your subconscious begins accepting those emotional states as normal. This is environmental conditioning. Now think about the deeper implication of this. If your environment repeatedly teaches limitation, then even powerful manifestation practices may struggle to stabilize, because the nervous system still feels emotionally familiar with the old reality. A person may visualize abundance for 20 minutes, then spend the remaining day inside environments reinforcing fear, scarcity, emotional chaos, criticism, insecurity, or self-doubt. And eventually the subconscious prioritizes repetition over temporary emotional intensity. This is why manifestation is not just about techniques. It is about emotional ecosystems. The environments surrounding your life either reinforce coherence or reinforce contradiction. And this brings us to one of the deepest psychological plot twists in this entire journey. Manifestation is not just personal, it is relational. That changes everything, because now manifestation is no longer viewed as isolated self-effort. It becomes deeply connected to environment, community, relationships, emotional exposure, nervous system regulation, identity reinforcement. The people around you subtly influence what your subconscious believes is realistic, possible, safe, normal. And this is why certain relationships accelerate growth while others quietly weaken alignment. Not because one person is superior to another, but because environments condition frequency. Frequency adaptation happens naturally. Human beings unconsciously adapt emotionally to repeated exposure. This is why spending time around hopeful people changes thinking, why chronic negativity eventually reshapes perception, why emotionally grounded individuals increase nervous system stability, why fearful environments shrink possibility perception. Your nervous system learns through repetition, not theory, repetition. And the environments you repeatedly enter become classrooms for your subconscious mind. Every environment teaches your subconscious what reality feels normal. That sentence alone can transform the way a person sees their entire life, because suddenly patterns begin making sense. Why some places inspired clarity? Why some relationships weakened confidence? Why some seasons of life expanded identity? Why others created contraction? You were never only reacting to circumstances. You were adapting to emotional ecosystems. And once this becomes conscious, intentionality begins deepening. You become more aware of what surrounds your nervous system daily, more aware of repeated emotional exposure, more aware of whose energy strengthens coherence and whose energy reinforces fragmentation, not from superiority, not from judgment, from responsibility, because protecting your nervous system is protecting your future. And this is where relationships become deeply spiritual, not in a mystical sense alone, but in a psychological sense. Every repeated interaction is shaping consciousness, shaping identity, shaping emotional expectation, shaping reality perception, and eventually shaping manifestation itself. This is why true transformation rarely happens through information alone. It happens through immersion, new emotional experiences, new relational dynamics, new environments, new patterns, new forms of nervous system safety. Because once the nervous system experiences a different emotional reality repeatedly enough, identity begins changing naturally, not through force, through adaptation. And perhaps this explains something many people secretly feel but struggle to articulate. Why some people inspire expansion without trying. Why certain conversations feel energizing. Why some environments feel emotionally heavy. Why some relationships quietly disconnect people from themselves. The subconscious is always learning from emotional repetition, always adapting, always synchronizing. And once you begin understanding that relationships are no longer random experiences, they become energetic architectures shaping the direction of your inner world. You have now seen how environments influence identity, how relationships shape frequency, how nervous systems unconsciously synchronize. And this leads to a deeper realization many manifestation teachings completely ignore. If emotional ecosystems shape reality, then why do so many manifestation teachings focus only on individual thought while ignoring relational conditioning entirely? Why do people attempt to change externally while remaining immersed in environments reinforcing internal contradiction? That is where we are going next. Because many modern manifestation teachings misunderstand the real nature of transformation itself. You have begun understanding the energetic architecture of relationships. Now it is time to uncover why most manifestation teachings fail in the first place. Chapter 6. Why most manifestation teachings fail. Positive thinking is not enough. That statement alone challenges one of the most widespread assumptions in modern manifestation culture. Because millions of people have been taught that changing thoughts alone changes reality. Think positively, visualize consistently, repeat affirmations, maintain high vibrations, avoid negativity. And while there is truth inside some of these ideas, something essential is often missing. Something deeper, something far more connected to human psychology, identity, relationships, and nervous system conditioning. Because many people are not failing to manifest due to lack of desire. They are failing because their inner world is unstable. Their identity is fragmented. Their nervous system does not feel safe sustaining the reality they consciously say they want. And no amount of forced positivity can fully override deep emotional conditioning indefinitely. This is why so many people feel frustrated with manifestation teachings after years of trying. They visualize abundance, yet still feel emotionally unsafe around money. They affirm self-worth, yet remain deeply dependent on external validation. They meditate on love, yet unconsciously fear vulnerability and emotional exposure. And eventually a painful question emerges. If manifestation works, why does my reality still feel disconnected from what I desire? The answer is often uncomfortable, because manifestation is not simply about thought. It is about coherence. And coherence requires much more than temporary mental focus. It requires nervous system alignment, identity stability, emotional consistency, environmental support, relational congruence. Most manifestation teachings focus heavily on the conscious mind while ignoring relational identity completely. But identity is not formed in isolation. It is formed socially, emotionally, environmentally, relationally. Human beings are conditioned through repetition and emotional exposure. And if the nervous system has rehearsed fear, scarcity, rejection, instability, criticism, emotional chaos, or self-abandonment for years, positive thoughts alone often struggle to stabilize new realities. Pause for a moment and think carefully about this. What if your environment has been rehearsing limitation into your nervous system for years? That question changes everything. Because suddenly manifestation is no longer viewed as a simple mental exercise. It becomes a process of emotional retraining, a process of identity stabilization, a process of becoming internally safe enough to sustain new realities consistently. You may not have noticed this before, but the nervous system does not automatically trust what the conscious mind wants. It trusts what feels emotionally familiar. This is why some people sabotage opportunities the moment success begins arriving. Why some push away healthy relationships. Why some collapse after periods of expansion. Why some repeatedly return to old emotional environments despite consciously wanting change. The subconscious always moves toward familiarity before possibility, and familiarity is shaped through conditioning. This is one of the hidden flaws inside many manifestation teachings. They encourage people to emotionally reach for realities their nervous system still experiences as unsafe, and eventually frustration begins building. The person visualizes success, but their body remains tense around visibility. They affirm abundance, but scarcity still feels emotionally normal. They say they want peace, but chaos has become psychologically familiar. And when internal contradiction continues repeating, manifestation starts feeling fake, exhausting, or inconsistent. This is why frequency without nervous system safety fails. Many people attempt to force high-frequency emotional states while ignoring unresolved emotional conditioning underneath. But suppressed fear does not disappear simply because someone repeats positive affirmations. The nervous system still remembers, still reacts, still protects, still anticipates based on previous emotional experiences. And unless the deeper identity becomes stabilized, emotional inconsistency continues interfering with manifestation. This is why forced positivity often creates emotional exhaustion instead of transformation. Because the person begins performing emotional states they cannot sustain authentically. Outwardly optimistic, internally unstable, and eventually the gap between appearance and reality becomes emotionally draining. Think about how often people feel pressured to appear spiritually aligned even while struggling internally. Always positive, always abundant, always high vibration, always grateful, always certain. But genuine transformation is rarely that linear. Real growth includes nervous system resistance, fear, uncertainty, emotional recalibration, identity shifts, and denying those realities often creates even more fragmentation. Because healing requires honesty before transcendence. Not performance, not spiritual masking. Honesty. This is why visualization without coherence creates frustration. Visualization can be powerful, but if the subconscious identity fundamentally contradicts the visualization, the nervous system experiences internal conflict instead of alignment. A person cannot sustainably embody realities that feel emotionally dangerous to their identity, not because manifestation is broken, but because the nervous system prioritizes protection over expansion. This explains something many people secretly experience but rarely discuss. Why manifestation practices often feel inspiring temporarily, then emotionally collapse later. Because temporary emotional intensity is not the same as stabilized identity. A motivational video may create excitement. A visualization session may create possibility. But once the person returns to emotionally conditioned environments, the old identity often reactivates again. The nervous system defaults back to familiar emotional rhythms. This is why social reinforcement loops matter so deeply. Human beings unconsciously reinforce each other's identities constantly. Families reinforce emotional roles. Friend groups reinforce behavioral expectations. Workplaces reinforce stress patterns. Relationships reinforce nervous system states. Communities reinforce belief systems. And eventually the subconscious mind begins treating those repeated emotional realities as normal. This is why manifestation cannot fully be separated from relational environments. A person may intellectually desire freedom, while remaining socially immersed in fear-based environments. They may desire expansion, while constantly surrounded by emotional contraction. They may want peace, while repeatedly exposing themselves to emotional chaos. And eventually, contradiction weakens coherence. This is also why isolation-based manifestation often becomes egoic. Many modern teachings unintentionally encourage emotional withdrawal from humanity itself. Protect your energy. Cut everyone off. Focus only on yourself. Detach from everyone. And while boundaries absolutely matter, complete emotional isolation often distorts manifestation into self-centered control rather than integrated expansion. Because true manifestation is not about escaping human connection. It is about transforming the way you participate within it. Human beings are relational by nature. Connection is not weakness. Dependency is. And many people accidentally confuse the two. A person does not become spiritually evolved by emotionally disconnecting from everyone around them. That often creates emotional rigidity, superiority, and nervous system isolation. Real growth creates grounded openness, the ability to remain internally stable while still engaging with life, still loving, still contributing, still connecting, still remaining human. This is why manifestation detached entirely from relational awareness becomes distorted. Because manifestation is not merely personal achievement. It is energetic participation, contribution, alignment, coherence between self and environment, not egoic separation from reality. Now here is the psychological plot twist many people never fully realize. Manifestation is less about attracting and more about stabilizing. That changes the entire framework. Because now the goal is not emotional intensity. The goal becomes nervous system coherence. Can your identity remain stable inside the reality you desire? Can your nervous system remain regulated inside abundance? Inside visibility? Inside intimacy? Inside uncertainty? Inside peace? Many people can momentarily experience expansion emotionally. Far fewer can stabilize it consistently. And stabilization requires emotional honesty, self-awareness, intentional environments, healthy relationships, supportive habits, and repeated nervous system reinforcement. This is why manifestation is deeply connected to energetic auditing. You must begin examining what repeatedly shapes your emotional state. Not obsessively, not fearfully, consciously. Look honestly at your relationships. Which connections reinforce clarity? Which reinforce instability? Which environments expand your nervous system? Which constantly activate survival patterns? Look honestly at your habits. What are you repeatedly consuming emotionally? What patterns dominate your mornings? Your evenings? Your mental atmosphere? Look honestly at your inputs. Media, conversations, social feeds, music, information. Energy enters consciousness through repetition, and repeated exposure becomes conditioning. Look honestly at your emotional rhythms. Do you live in constant overstimulation, constant urgency, constant comparison, constant emotional monitoring? Or do you intentionally create moments of nervous system regulation, silence, reflection, grounding, presence, rest? Because emotional rhythms eventually shape identity, and identity shapes manifestation. This is why intentionality matters more than temporary motivation. Anyone can feel inspired briefly, but sustained transformation requires environmental alignment, relational alignment, behavioral alignment, nervous system alignment. This is the deeper work many manifestation teachings overlook. Not because they are entirely wrong, but because they are incomplete. They often focus on conscious desire while ignoring subconscious conditioning. They focus on thoughts while ignoring emotional ecosystems. They focus on attraction while ignoring stabilization. And without stabilization, manifestations often remain temporary. This is why some people repeatedly attract new realities, only to lose them later. Not because they are cursed, not because manifestation stopped working, but because the nervous system eventually returned to emotional familiarity. Old patterns, old fears, old relational conditioning, old identity structures. And this is why real transformation requires more than techniques. It requires integration. The slow process of becoming internally coherent enough that your outer life no longer constantly conflicts with your inner reality. That is where sustainable manifestation begins. Not through force, not through performance, but through stabilization. And perhaps this explains why some people eventually stop chasing manifestation entirely and start focusing instead on becoming emotionally aligned, because they realize something profound. Reality often changes naturally once identity becomes coherent, once emotional contradiction weakens, once nervous system safety deepens, once relationships become healthier, once environmental conditioning changes, once the self stops fighting itself internally, then manifestation no longer feels like manipulation. It feels like natural expansion. You have now seen why many manifestation teachings fail. Not because manifestation itself is false, but because transformation requires deeper integration than thought alone. And now we arrive at the next stage of the journey. If manifestation depends on coherence, then what exactly creates coherence? How does a person stop fragmenting internally? How do they stabilize identity without becoming rigid? How do inner and outer worlds finally begin cooperating instead of competing? That is where we are going next. You have begun understanding why unstable identity disrupts manifestation. Now it is time to uncover the principle that changes everything. Chapter 7. The Coherence Principle. There comes a moment in many people's lives when they realize something quietly devastating. They are exhausted, not only physically, not only mentally, existentially, tired of performing different versions of themselves, tired of adapting constantly, tired of emotional contradiction, tired of trying to hold together identities that no longer fully fit. One version at work, another in relationships, another online, another with family, another in solitude, and eventually the nervous system begins carrying the weight of fragmentation itself. Because fragmentation consumes energy, the mind becomes tired from constant self-monitoring. The body becomes tense from emotional inconsistency. The spirit becomes heavy from living too far away from authenticity. And many people mistake this exhaustion for laziness, burnout, lack of motivation. But often, the deeper issue is incoherence. Their inner world and outer world are no longer cooperating. One part of the self desires expansion. Another part still operates from survival. One part desires truth. Another part fears rejection. One part wants peace. Another part unconsciously recreates chaos because chaos feels familiar. And until these contradictions become conscious, life continues feeling unstable no matter how much external progress occurs. This is why so many people secretly feel disconnected even after achieving things they once desperately wanted. Because success without coherence still feels emotionally unstable. A person can manifest opportunity while remaining internally fragmented. They can attract relationships while still fearing intimacy. They can build wealth while subconsciously identifying with scarcity. And eventually contradiction creates tension between reality and identity. This is where the coherence principle changes everything. Real manifestation happens when inner and outer worlds stop competing and begin cooperating. Pause for a moment and really think about how powerful that is. Most people spend years trying to force reality externally while remaining internally divided. But sustainable manifestation requires alignment, not perfection. Alignment. The gradual integration of thoughts, emotions, behaviors, relationships, values, nervous system patterns, and identity into a more unified direction. Coherence is when the self stops sending opposing signals internally. When your desires, decisions, emotional patterns, and environments begin reinforcing each other instead of contradicting each other. This is why coherence creates peace more deeply than temporary success ever can. Because peace emerges naturally when contradiction weakens. You may not have noticed this before, but the nervous system manifests familiarity more than fantasy. That is one of the deepest truths in this entire journey. The subconscious mind consistently moves toward realities that feel emotionally survivable, not merely desirable. Survivable, safe, recognizable, predictable. This explains why some people unconsciously sabotage expansion the moment life begins improving. Because growth often requires becoming psychologically unfamiliar to yourself. And unfamiliarity activates uncertainty. The nervous system begins asking, can I actually sustain this? Is this safe? Will people still accept me? Will I lose connection? Will I lose identity? Will I still recognize myself? Most people believe fear appears only around failure. But fear often appears around expansion too. Because expansion changes identity. And identity changes emotional familiarity. Pause for a moment and think honestly about your own life. How many opportunities did you hesitate to fully embrace because they required becoming someone emotionally unfamiliar? More visible, more open, more disciplined, more abundant, more authentic, more vulnerable, more powerful, more honest. Growth does not only challenge limitation, it challenges familiarity. And this is why transformation can feel emotionally disorienting even when it is positive. The old identity begins dissolving. The new identity has not fully stabilized yet, and the nervous system temporarily exists between realities. This is why self-trust matters so deeply. Without self-trust, people retreat back toward familiar emotional patterns the moment uncertainty appears. Back toward old environments, old coping mechanisms, old relational dynamics, old limitations. Not because they consciously want suffering, but because familiarity feels emotionally safer than expansion. You do not rise into manifestations that feel unsafe to your identity. That sentence explains more human behavior than most people realize. A person may consciously desire visibility, but subconsciously associate visibility with criticism, rejection, pressure, or danger. A person may desire love, but subconsciously associate intimacy with abandonment, betrayal, or loss of self. A person may desire abundance, but subconsciously associate wealth with guilt, pressure, responsibility, or separation from others. And eventually the nervous system creates resistance, not because the manifestation itself is wrong, but because the identity supporting it is unstable. This is why manifestation is deeply connected to emotional safety. Not comfort, safety. There is a difference. Comfort avoids challenge. Safety allows expansion without collapse. A coherent nervous system can experience uncertainty without immediately abandoning itself emotionally. It can remain grounded during growth, flexible during change, present during discomfort, and this creates sustainability. Now here is the psychological plot twist most people never fully recognize. Many people are not afraid of failure. They are afraid of becoming someone unfamiliar. That realization changes the entire understanding of resistance. Because now resistance is no longer viewed as weakness. It becomes identity protection. The nervous system defending emotional familiarity. Think about how often people unconsciously shrink themselves to remain recognizable to others, to family, to friends, to old environments, to social expectations. Growth threatens relational equilibrium. The moment a person changes significantly, old dynamics begin shifting too. And sometimes people unconsciously fear losing connection more than they desire expansion. This is why coherence requires courage. The courage to remain aligned even when the old identity begins dissolving. The courage to tolerate temporary unfamiliarity. The courage to stop performing emotionally outdated versions of yourself for the comfort of others. And perhaps most importantly, the courage to trust that authenticity creates deeper stability than adaptation ever could. Because incoherence eventually becomes unsustainable. A fragmented identity constantly leaks energy. One part of the self wants truth. Another part performs. One part desires peace. Another part recreates emotional chaos. One part seeks alignment. Another part seeks approval. And eventually emotional exhaustion appears because the self is internally divided. But coherence simplifies reality. Not externally, internally. Decisions become clearer. Relationships become clearer. Desires become clearer. Boundaries become clearer. Because the nervous system is no longer constantly negotiating between competing identities. This is why integrated identity creates enormous emotional power. An integrated person does not need to constantly perform different versions of themselves across environments. They remain internally connected, flexible without fragmentation, open without self-loss, grounded without emotional rigidity. This creates self-trust. And self-trust changes manifestation profoundly. Because manifestation becomes less about forcing outcomes and more about trusting alignment. The person no longer chases every opportunity desperately. They no longer abandon themselves to maintain connection. They no longer seek constant external validation to stabilize identity. Instead, they begin making decisions from coherence. And coherent decisions compound over time, not dramatically at first, subtly, repeatedly. A healthier boundary, a clearer relationship, a more aligned environment, a more honest conversation, a more grounded emotional rhythm. And eventually the outer world begins reflecting the stability developing internally. This is why manifestation often accelerates once internal contradiction weakens. Not because the universe suddenly changes its mind, but because the person stops unconsciously fighting themselves. Energy previously consumed by fragmentation becomes available for creation. Clarity increases. Consistency increases. Emotional resilience increases. Presence increases. And life begins flowing differently. Not perfectly, differently. This is also why coherence creates sustainability. Many manifestations disappear because the identity supporting them never stabilized fully. A person may temporarily access abundance emotionally, then return to scarcity-conditioned environments, reinforcing the old identity again. A person may attract healthy love, then unconsciously recreate emotional instability because chaos still feels familiar. A person may experience rapid growth, then emotionally collapse under the pressure of unfamiliar identity expansion. And this explains something many people struggle to understand. Why manifestations sometimes disappear after arriving. Not because manifestation failed, but because coherence was incomplete. The nervous system returned to emotional familiarity. This is why sustainable manifestation requires integration, not emotional intensity alone. Integration means the inner and outer worlds gradually stop contradicting each other. Your values align with your actions. Your relationships align with your nervous system. Your goals align with your authentic desires. Your environments reinforce your expansion instead of undermining it. And over time, stability deepens. Not rigid control. Stability. The kind that allows growth without emotional collapse. This is why coherence is not about becoming perfect. It is about becoming congruent, whole, internally connected, no longer divided between competing emotional realities. And perhaps this is what many people have truly been searching for all along. not merely manifestation, but inner cooperation. The feeling that the mind, body, emotions, identity, and relationships are finally moving in the same direction. That feeling changes everything. Because once coherence develops, life no longer feels like constant resistance. The self stops pulling against itself, and creation becomes far more natural, far more sustainable, far more peaceful. You have now begun understanding the principle beneath lasting transformation. Not force, not performance, not temporary motivation. Coherence, the integration of inner and outer reality into emotional stability. But now another question emerges naturally. If coherence creates sustainability, then how does a person actually begin rebuilding identity consciously? How do they stop living from inherited conditioning? How do they become emotionally sovereign without isolating themselves from humanity? How do they create a self rooted in truth instead of adaptation? That is where we are going next. You have begun understanding the coherence principle. Now it is time to rebuild the self from a deeper foundation. Chapter 8. Building Inner Authority Without Isolation. There is a stage of transformation most people misunderstand. They assume growth means becoming more independent in a visible way, more distant, more detached, more emotionally unreachable. But that is not inner authority. That is often just another form of emotional protection wearing a different mask. True transformation does not pull you away from humanity. It teaches you how to remain within it without losing yourself. This is where self-trust becomes the foundation of everything. Not self-confidence in the performative sense, but self-trust in the lived sense. The quiet ability to rely on your own inner clarity without constantly outsourcing emotional direction to others. Because many people do not lack intelligence. They lack internal authority. They hesitate. They second-guess. They overconsult. They overadjust. They overmonitor how others might react. And slowly, decisions become less about truth and more about emotional safety. This is how identity becomes externally governed, not through force, but through dependency on feedback. Pause for a moment and reflect on something honestly. Can you remain connected without surrendering your center? That question reveals the difference between emotional fusion and emotional sovereignty, between attachment and presence, between insecurity and grounded awareness, between performing identity and living it. Because inner authority is not about rejecting people. It is about not losing yourself inside them. It is the ability to stay internally stable while still being relationally open, to listen without absorbing everything, to care without collapsing, to engage without overextending, to connect without disappearing. This is emotional sovereignty, and it is built slowly, through repeated acts of self-trust. Not dramatic breakthroughs, daily consistency, small decisions where you choose alignment over approval, clarity over comfort, truth over adaptation. And each time you do this, something subtle strengthens inside the nervous system, a sense of internal grounding, a quiet confidence that does not depend on external validation to remain stable. This is what most people miss about confidence. Confidence is not loud certainty. It is quiet self-consistency, the ability to remain aligned with yourself across time, even when emotions fluctuate, even when uncertainty appears, even when external pressure increases, even when others do not understand your direction. Inner authority is built in silence, not in performance. This is why solitude becomes important again in a different way. Not isolation, not emotional withdrawal, but intentional solitude. Solitude rituals where you return to your own emotional center without external interference. Moments where your identity is not being shaped by reaction, notified, evaluated, compared, or influenced. Just presence, just awareness, just internal reconnection. Because without these moments, the nervous system remains constantly shaped by external input. And when everything shapes you, nothing belongs fully to you. But when you intentionally return to yourself, clarity begins to rebuild. Thoughts settle, emotional noise reduces, inner direction becomes more audible, and slowly, you begin recognizing your own voice again beneath the influence of everything else. This is where decision ownership becomes essential. Many people unconsciously allow their decisions to be shaped by emotional pressure. What will others think? Will this disappoint someone? Will I be judged? Will I lose connection? Will I appear selfish? And so decisions become compromises rather than expressions of truth. Inner authority requires reversing that pattern, not becoming careless, but becoming conscious. Before making decisions, asking, is this aligned with my truth or my fear of disconnection? Is this choice coming from clarity or emotional pressure? Is this direction expanding me or shrinking me to maintain comfort? This is how sovereignty develops, not through perfection, through awareness. And over time, something shifts internally. You begin noticing emotional impulses without immediately obeying them. You begin observing reactions without identifying with them. You begin creating space between stimulus and response. This is emotional observation, a critical step in building inner authority. Because most people are not aware of their emotions. They are merged with them. Anxiety becomes identity. Fear becomes identity. Doubt becomes identity. Excitement becomes identity. But emotional sovereignty creates separation. You feel emotions without becoming them. You experience them without being controlled by them. And in that space, clarity emerges. This is where real discernment develops. Not judgment, discernment. The ability to recognize what aligns with your growth and what pulls you away from yourself. Who strengthens your clarity and who dissolves it. Which environments expand your nervous system and which constrict it. Which conversations ground you and which destabilize you. This is not about cutting people off impulsively. It is about awareness, understanding energetic consequences, understanding relational impact, understanding emotional patterns over time. Because inner authority does not isolate you from life. It refines how you participate in it. You become more selective, more intentional, more aware, not closed, clear. And this clarity begins changing your entire emotional landscape. You stop over-explaining yourself. You stop seeking constant reassurance. You stop outsourcing your internal stability to external responses. You begin trusting your own perception again, not blindly, but steadily. And this is where emotional dependency begins to dissolve naturally, not through force, but through clarity. And perhaps this is the most important shift of all. Inner authority does not require emotional isolation. It requires emotional stability within connection. You can be deeply present with others without losing yourself. You can listen without absorbing. You can engage without collapsing. You can love without self-abandonment. You can care without dependency. This is what allows relationships to evolve into healthier forms. Because you are no longer using connection to stabilize identity. You are bringing a stable identity into connection. That changes everything. Because now relationships are no longer survival mechanisms. They become conscious experiences, interactions between two grounded individuals, not emotional fusion, not dependency loops, not identity loss, but presence meeting presence. And this is where true connection becomes possible. But before that can happen, inner authority must become stronger than external influence. This is why reducing external dependency is not about isolation. It is about recalibration, not constantly seeking emotional validation before making decisions, not constantly checking external reactions before trusting yourself, not constantly outsourcing clarity to other people's opinions. Instead, returning inward, asking your own perception, listening before reacting, feeling before responding, and allowing your internal world to regain leadership. Because if your inner world is not leading, something else always will. Environment, people, fear, expectation, conditioning. Inner authority means reclaiming that leadership gently but consistently. And over time, something remarkable happens. You begin noticing that your presence alone becomes more stable, less reactive, less dependent, more grounded. You stop feeling emotionally pulled in every direction. You stop losing yourself in every interaction. You stop collapsing under emotional pressure. And instead, you remain centered, not rigid, centered. And from that centered state, connection becomes healthier, safer, more honest, more sustainable. Because inner authority allows connection without collapse. You can enter relationships without disappearing into them. You can leave relationships without losing yourself. You can engage with environments without being consumed by them. And you can remain emotionally open without becoming unstable. This is the foundation of real transformation. Not separation from life, but sovereignty within it. And perhaps this explains something many people quietly realize after years of growth. That true confidence is not about becoming untouchable. It is about becoming unshakable within yourself. Not because nothing affects you, but because nothing defines you externally anymore. You remain connected, but not dependent. Present, but not consumed. Open, but not lost. And that is the beginning of real freedom. You have now begun building inner authority, not as isolation, but as grounded self-leadership. And now the question becomes even deeper. If inner authority allows you to remain stable within connection, then how do you begin moving through life in a way that aligns every aspect of your identity with this stability? How do you integrate relationships, purpose, and manifestation into one unified direction without fragmentation returning? That is where we are going next. You have begun building the self. Now it is time to integrate the self. Chapter 9. Healthy interdependence and conscious relationships. At a certain point in personal development, something begins to shift quietly in how a person sees relationships. They stop asking, "How do I become completely independent?" and begin asking something far more grounded. How do I stay whole while staying connected? Because the real goal was never isolation. And it was never fusion either. It was something far more mature. Healthy interdependence. This is the stage where transformation becomes relational instead of purely internal. Where growth is no longer something done in solitude alone, but something expressed through conscious connection with others. And this is where many people finally begin to understand a deeper truth. Human beings were never meant to evolve in separation from each other. But they also were never meant to lose themselves inside each other. The middle path is not compromise. It is integration. Pause for a moment and let that land. Healthy interdependence means two whole individuals choosing to participate in each other's growth without surrendering their identity in the process. Not dependency, not isolation, but conscious collaboration. This is where relationships stop being emotional survival systems and start becoming environments for expansion. You begin noticing a different quality of connection. Certain relationships energize you, not in a chaotic or addictive way, but in a grounding way. You leave conversations feeling clearer, not confused, more aligned, not fragmented, more present, not scattered. And something subtle happens in your nervous system. It begins to relax around authenticity. You do not feel the need to perform. You do not feel the need to shrink. You do not feel the need to over-explain yourself to be understood. You can simply be. And that being is enough. This is the beginning of conscious relationship dynamics, where safety is not built through control, but through mutual emotional regulation and respect for individuality. Because when two people are emotionally regulated, something powerful emerges. The nervous system stops operating from survival and begins operating from presence. This is why healthy relationships often feel calm, not because they lack depth, but because they lack distortion. There is less emotional chaos, less fear-based reaction, less identity collapse, and more steady connection. This is what healthy interdependence feels like at its best. Mutual growth, shared expansion, energetic reciprocity. Not one person constantly giving while the other constantly takes. Not one person shrinking while the other expands, but both people evolving in parallel, supporting each other's becoming without losing themselves in the process. And perhaps this is what many people have been searching for without having the language for it. Relationships where authenticity does not threaten belonging, where honesty does not create emotional punishment, where vulnerability does not lead to self-loss, where growth does not lead to separation. Because in many environments, people learn to adapt themselves just to maintain connection. They shrink their truth. They silence their intuition. They over-accommodate. They become versions of themselves that feel acceptable rather than authentic. But in conscious relationships, something different is possible. You are allowed to remain yourself, fully, without apology, without performance, without emotional distortion. And this is where identity begins stabilizing even more deeply, because the environment is no longer asking you to fragment. It is supporting your coherence. You may not have noticed this before, but healthy connection regulates the nervous system. It calms the body. It steadies the mind. It softens emotional reactivity. It reinforces safety at a subconscious level. And over time, it teaches your system something profound. That connection does not have to equal self-abandonment. That intimacy does not require emotional collapse. That love does not require losing yourself. This rewires everything. Because many people's nervous systems were trained in environments where connection and self-loss were intertwined. So they unconsciously expect relationships to cost them identity. But conscious relationships challenge that expectation. They create a new emotional reference point, one where you can remain whole while being close to another person. Now imagine this clearly. Relationships where you do not need to shrink to belong. Pause with that for a moment, because for many people, that concept feels unfamiliar at first, almost unrealistic, because they have only experienced belonging through adaptation, through compromise of identity, through emotional self-editing. But healthy interdependence reveals a different possibility: belonging without distortion, connection without collapse, closeness without emotional fusion. And this is where relationships begin shifting from survival-based dynamics into conscious creation. Because love is no longer measured by sacrifice alone. It is measured by whether both people remain whole. This is a critical psychological shift. Many people were taught that love requires suffering, that devotion requires self-neglect, that commitment requires emotional disappearance. But that is not love. That is imbalance. True love does not require self-erasure. It requires presence, respect, clarity, mutual expansion. A relationship where one person constantly loses themselves is not sustainable love. It is energetic depletion disguised as connection. And eventually, it leads to resentment, confusion, or emotional exhaustion. Healthy interdependence changes that pattern completely, because now the focus is not sacrifice. It is alignment. Does this relationship support your nervous system? Does it expand your identity? Does it reinforce your clarity? Does it allow both people to grow without emotional suppression? These questions become more important than emotional intensity alone, because intensity is not the same as health. And passion is not the same as stability. Now here is the coaching shift that changes everything. Selective intimacy. Not everyone gets the same level of emotional access. Not every relationship is designed for deep integration. Not every environment supports your coherence. And that is not rejection. That is discernment. Healthy interdependence requires energetic standards. Not walls. Standards. Clarity about what kind of emotional dynamics you allow to influence your nervous system consistently. Because repeated exposure shapes identity. And identity shapes manifestation. So your relationships are not just emotional experiences. They are identity environments. This is why selective intimacy becomes essential for long-term alignment. You begin noticing who strengthens your clarity, and who dissolves it, who supports your growth, and who pulls you into emotional fragmentation, who encourages your authenticity, and who requires your adaptation. And slowly, your relational world becomes more intentional, not smaller, more aligned. You begin choosing relationships that support shared vision, not just shared history, not just shared comfort, but shared direction. Because conscious relationships are built on movement, not stagnation, on growth, not maintenance of old identities, on expansion, not emotional repetition of the past. And when two people are aligned in direction, something powerful happens. They no longer drain each other through unconscious conflict. They reinforce each other's evolution. They become mirrors of growth instead of triggers of survival. And this creates a completely different emotional reality. One where connection becomes a stabilizing force instead of a destabilizing one. One where intimacy becomes grounding instead of overwhelming. One where love becomes expansion instead of self-loss. And perhaps this is the most important realization in this entire journey. You do not have to choose between freedom and connection. You do not have to choose between self and love. You do not have to choose between identity and belonging. Because healthy interdependence holds both. It allows individuality to remain intact, while still participating deeply in shared human experience. And this is where the entire framework of manifestation begins to stabilize. Because now your environment is no longer constantly contradicting your internal growth. Your relationships reinforce coherence. Your habits reinforce alignment. Your emotional experiences reinforce stability. And your identity no longer has to fragment just to survive connection. You become whole within relationships, not separate from them. Not consumed by them, but expressed through them. And that changes everything. Because now your life is no longer split between who you are alone and who you become around others. You are the same person, across environments, across relationships, across time. This is integration. This is coherence in motion. And this is the foundation of sustainable manifestation. You have now seen the full spectrum. From isolation to overconnection, to authority, to coherence, to conscious relationships. And now the final question emerges naturally. What does it look like to live as this integrated identity consistently? How does a person move through life without fragmentation returning? How do they embody balance not as an idea, but as a lived reality? That is where we are going next. Chapter 10. Becoming whole in a world of influence. There reaches a point in every journey of self-understanding where the search itself begins to quiet down. Not because everything has been solved, but because something inside becomes more stable than before, more grounded, more aware, more whole. And from that state, life is no longer experienced as a constant problem to fix. It becomes something to participate in consciously. Because when inner coherence develops, outer chaos loses its ability to fully define you. This is where intentional living begins. Not as a concept, but as a lived state of awareness. A moment-to-moment recognition that your attention, your energy, your relationships, and your choices are shaping the direction of your identity continuously. Not occasionally, continuously. And this awareness changes everything. Because most people are not consciously designing their identity. They are being shaped by influence, by repetition, by environment, by emotional conditioning, by unconscious patterns inherited from relationships, culture, and past experience. But when awareness awakens, something shifts. You stop living reactively and begin living deliberately. You begin observing your patterns instead of being absorbed by them. You begin noticing which environments expand you and which quietly contract you, which relationships reinforce clarity and which blur your emotional direction, which habits strengthen coherence and which fragment attention. This is conscious identity design, not in a rigid or controlling sense, but in a stabilizing sense. Choosing what repeatedly shapes your nervous system. Choosing what consistently influences your emotional baseline. Choosing what you allow to become familiar inside your identity. Because familiarity becomes reality over time, and reality becomes identity, and identity becomes the foundation of manifestation. Pause for a moment and reflect on something deeply. Your life is not only happening to you, it is also being shaped through you, through the environments you repeatedly enter, through the emotional states you repeatedly accept, through the relationships you repeatedly normalize, through the internal narratives you repeatedly rehearse. And when this becomes conscious, you are no longer simply living. You are participating in your own becoming. This is where alignment becomes essential. Not alignment as perfection, but alignment as coherence. The gradual reduction of internal contradiction, so that your thoughts, emotions, behaviors, relationships, and vision begin moving in the same direction. Because when they are aligned, life feels less fragmented, less resistant, less internally divided. You begin experiencing something subtle but profound. Flow, not constant ease, but reduced internal conflict. And this creates space for clarity, space for creativity, space for direction, space for emotional stability. And over time, something even deeper emerges. A sense of self-trust that no longer depends on external validation to remain steady. Because you have seen yourself make aligned decisions repeatedly. You have witnessed the outcomes of coherence. You have experienced the difference between fragmentation and integration. And that experience builds internal authority. Now here is a truth that brings this entire journey into perspective. Your life changes when your inner world stops fighting your outer world. That is not metaphorical. That is structural. Because when inner contradiction weakens, outer expression stabilizes. When emotional fragmentation reduces, decision-making becomes clearer. When identity stops shifting constantly, relationships become more grounded. When nervous system safety increases, manifestation becomes more consistent. And slowly, life begins to reflect internal coherence. Not instantly, but inevitably, because external reality is always responding to internal organization over time. This is why you were never meant to choose between freedom and connection. The conflict itself was never the final truth. It was an early stage of awareness, a tension that reveals imbalance, not destiny. Because freedom without connection becomes emptiness, and connection without freedom becomes self-loss. But integrated together, they form wholeness. And wholeness is where true power begins. Not dominance, not withdrawal, not emotional dependency. Wholeness, the ability to remain yourself while fully participating in life. The ability to stay grounded while being emotionally connected. The ability to remain open without losing identity. The ability to remain independent without disconnecting from humanity. This is the resolution of the paradox. And from this point forward, the question is no longer about choosing sides. It becomes about embodiment. Who are you becoming through the way you live, relate, think, and respond? Because identity is not a fixed concept. It is an ongoing expression. And every moment either reinforces fragmentation or reinforces coherence. Now here is the final psychological twist that completes the entire framework. The strongest people are not isolated. And the most loving people are not self-abandoned. That truth dismantles two extremes at once, because strength is not emotional distance, and love is not emotional disappearance. Strength is stability within connection. Love is presence without self-loss. And when both exist together, something rare emerges. A human being who can remain grounded in themselves while still deeply engaged with life. This is not detachment, and it is not dependency. It is integration. Now reflect on this carefully. Who do you become when you no longer need to disappear to belong, or isolate to feel powerful? That question does not demand an immediate answer. It invites awareness, because the answer is not something you think your way into. It is something you live into. And as you continue living with this awareness, something subtle begins to change. You become more intentional, more selective, more present, more aware of emotional patterns that no longer serve your coherence. And slowly, without force, identity begins reorganizing itself around truth instead of adaptation. Now return to the beginning of this journey, the tension between freedom and belonging, the fear of losing yourself in connection, the fear of losing connection through independence. And notice how differently it feels now, because what once appeared as contradiction now reveals itself as balance waiting to be understood. Freedom and connection were never enemies. Identity and community were never opposites. Vision and relationships were never in conflict. They only appeared that way when coherence was missing. But when integration develops, they begin supporting each other, not competing, cooperating. And this is where the journey completes itself, not in resolution of all complexity, but in the ability to remain whole within it. Music softens, expands, slows, and now we arrive at the closing, where everything returns to its essential truth. In closing, by now, you have likely realized something important. The conflict you have felt throughout your life was never simply about success, relationships, independence, or manifestation. It was about coherence, the struggle between who you truly are and who you believed you needed to become in order to feel safe, accepted, loved, respected, or enough. Most people never recognize how deeply their environment shapes their identity. They absorb emotional patterns from families, relationships, cultures, social media, fears, expectations, and survival mechanisms, until they no longer know which thoughts genuinely belong to them. And slowly, without realizing it, they begin living fragmented lives. One version of themselves around friends, another around family, another online, another inside their own mind late at night, trying to belong everywhere, while feeling fully connected nowhere. But the deeper truth is this: your life changes when your inner world stops fighting your outer world. When your actions, emotions, relationships, and identity begin moving in the same direction. That is coherence. And coherence changes everything. Because manifestation was never meant to be about forcing reality through constant effort. It was never about pretending to feel positive. It was never about endlessly chasing techniques while remaining emotionally disconnected from yourself. Manifestation is not performance. It is alignment. It is the natural result of becoming internally stable enough to sustain the reality you desire. And that stability cannot exist through isolation alone, nor can it exist through emotional dependency. One creates distance, the other creates self-loss. But somewhere between those extremes, there is balance, a way of living where you remain deeply connected without abandoning yourself. A way of creating where your ambition no longer disconnects you from your humanity. A way of loving where you do not disappear in order to belong. This is the sacred balance, the ability to remain whole while participating fully in life. To move between solitude and connection without distortion. To protect your soul without closing your heart. To pursue your vision without losing your peace. To remain grounded while still expanding. Pause for a moment and reflect on your own life now. How much energy have you spent trying to prove yourself? How often have you hidden parts of yourself to maintain connection? How many times have you confused emotional protection with strength? And how different would your life feel if you no longer needed to isolate to feel powerful or self-abandon to feel loved? Because the truth is, you were never meant to choose between freedom and belonging. You were meant to integrate them. You were meant to become someone capable of standing fully within yourself, while still remaining open to life, connection, purpose, and love. That is where real peace begins. And perhaps this is the greatest realization of all. The life you desire may not require becoming someone entirely different. It may simply require becoming more coherent, more honest, more grounded, more aligned with the truth of who you already are beneath fear, performance, and conditioning. So as this audiobook comes to a close, do not rush away from these ideas. Sit with them. Observe your patterns. Pay attention to the environments that shape your energy. Notice which relationships expand you and which ones slowly pull you away from yourself. Learn the difference between connection and dependency, between solitude and isolation, between confidence and emotional avoidance. And most importantly, remember this: too much self creates distance. Too much others creates disappearance. But the truth lives in the balance between both. Stay whole while you expand. Protect your peace without abandoning connection. Build your vision without losing your humanity. And continue becoming the type of person whose inner world and outer world no longer compete, but cooperate. Because manifestation does not respond to extremes. It responds to coherence. And once coherence is established, life begins changing naturally, not through force, but through alignment. Thank you for listening. And wherever you are in your journey, may you continue becoming complete, not divided.